For 5 years, I thought I had a solid marriage. Carla and I weren't perfect. No one is, but I figured we had a good thing going. I worked hard as a software engineer to give us a comfortable life in Denver. Carla had her Etsy shop, which brought in a little money here and there, but it was more of a hobby. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner, my best friend. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that trust can blind you. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. It started small. One night, Carla was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I sat down next to her and asked how her day was. She muttered something vague about working on orders and turned her phone away. I didn't think much of it. She was usually open with me, so I figured she was just in a mood. But then it started happening more often. She'd stay glued to her phone during dinner, laughing at messages but refusing to say who they were from. If I asked, she'd shrug and say, "Just the girls." I should have pressed harder, but I didn't want to be that guy. The controlling, suspicious husband. Then came the trips. Madison and I are going to New York for the weekend, she announced one Friday morning over coffee. New York? I asked, surprised. Since when do you two travel together? She found a great deal on flights, Carla said. We've been wanting to do a girls' trip forever. Don't worry, it's just a couple of days. I didn't love the idea, but I didn't want to be a killjoy. I trusted her. When she got back, she was full of stories about sightseeing and shopping. She even brought me a souvenir, a Yankees cap. It seemed thoughtful at the time, but now I realize it was just part of the act. The trips became more frequent. New York turned into Miami, then Chicago. Each time, she'd come back with new clothes, designer bags, and jewelry. When I asked how she could afford all that, she'd wave me off. We pooled our money, she said. Besides, you work so hard. I figured I deserved a little treat. It wasn't just the trips. She was pulling away from me in other ways, too. She'd snap at me over little things, like forgetting to put my shoes away or leaving the toothpaste cap off. She stopped asking about my day and barely seemed interested when I talked about work. One night, I brought up the idea of starting a family, something we'd always planned on. I don't think I'm ready for that anymore, she said, barely looking up from her phone. That hit me like a ton of bricks. Starting a family had always been part of our plan. What changed? Is there something going on, Carla? I asked. She sighed dramatically. You're always working, Nate. You don't even notice when I'm struggling. I don't feel supported. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I worked long hours to support us, to give her the freedom to do what she loved. Was that not enough? Still, I let it go. I wanted to fix things, not fight. But my gut was telling me something wasn't right. One night, I woke up around midnight and noticed Carla wasn't in bed. I got up to look for her and found her sitting on the couch with her laptop, headphones in, whispering softly. Carla, I said, startling her. She jumped and slammed the laptop shut. What are you doing up? She asked, her voice sharp. I could ask you the same thing, I said. I was working, she said quickly. Go back to bed. She wouldn't even look at me. Her reaction set off every alarm in my head, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. So, I let it slide for now. Over the next few weeks, I started paying more attention. I noticed she was on her phone constantly, smiling at messages she refused to show me. She'd disappear for hours without saying where she was going. And when I asked, she'd snap. Why do you care all of a sudden? I felt like I was losing her, but I didn't know what to do. The breaking point came when she left for another girls' trip, this time to Los Angeles. Something about the way she packed, the way she avoided eye contact, told me this wasn't just a getaway with friends. While she was gone, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened her laptop. It was password protected, but Carla wasn't exactly creative. Her password was our anniversary date. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. She'd been talking to a guy named Derek, a self-proclaimed entrepreneur from LA. His Instagram was full of pictures of him on yachts, in front of luxury cars, and at exclusive parties. In their messages, Carla called him the man I've been waiting for. She said she was trapped in a boring marriage and deserved someone who could treat her like a queen. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But the worst part? Derek wasn't just some random guy. He was flying her out to see him. The trips, the shopping sprees, the new jewelry, it was all him. And Carla was playing along, telling him she'd leave me soon, that she was just waiting for the right moment. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, was lying to my face and planning her exit behind my back. But I wasn't going to confront her just yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. When Carla got back from her trip, it felt like I was living with a stranger. She walked through the door in her designer heels, swinging a Chanel bag that practically screamed, "I didn't buy this at a thrift store." "Hey," I said, standing in the kitchen. "Hey," she replied, her voice distant as she dumped the bag on the counter and walked straight to the bedroom. I followed her. "How was the trip?" "It was fine," she said, unzipping her suitcase. "We just hung out and shopped." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her sort through her clothes. There was a new silk blouse, a pair of leather boots I'd never seen before, and a jewelry box from Tiffany & Company. "Looks like you went all out," I said. She shrugged. "Madison found all the good sales." Madison, the mythical best friend who conveniently couldn't confirm or deny any of these stories. I wanted to press her, but I kept quiet for now. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Carla was glued to her phone, grinning at messages and disappearing for hours under the guise of running errands. She started dressing up more, spending hours on her hair and makeup, even when she had nowhere to go. One night, I caught her standing in front of the mirror, wearing a low-cut dress I hadn't seen before. "You look nice," I said from the doorway. She jumped, startled. "I'm meeting Madison for dinner," she said quickly, grabbing her purse. "At 9 p.m.? I asked. "She works late," Carla snapped. "Why are you always questioning me?" "I'm not," I said, holding up my hands. "Just curious." "Well, stop," she said, brushing past me. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door after she left. My gut told me she wasn't with Madison, but I had no proof. The next day, I decided to check her laptop. Carla wasn't exactly tech-savvy, and I knew her password was the same one she used for everything. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A trail of emails and social media messages that painted a picture I wasn't ready to see. She'd been planning another trip, this time to Chicago. I scrolled through the emails, my chest tightening with every new message. Hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, even a ticket for a Broadway show. And the kicker? The reservation was for 2 people. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop across the room. But instead, I closed it quietly and put it back where I found it. When Carla got home that evening, I asked her about her plans for the weekend. "Oh, I'm heading to Chicago," she said casually. "For what?" "Business," she said. "I'm meeting a supplier for the shop." "Since when do you have suppliers in Chicago?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "It's a networking thing, Nate. You wouldn't get it." "Networking." "Right." Because Carla, who could barely keep her Etsy shop afloat, suddenly needed to network with suppliers in a city she'd never mentioned before. "Sounds fun," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It's not fun," she snapped. "It's work." The defensiveness in her tone said it all. The night before her business trip, Carla was packing her suitcase when I walked into the bedroom. "Need any help?" I asked. "No," she said quickly, shoving a pair of heels into the bag. I watched her for a moment. "You know, we haven't taken a trip together in a while," I said. "Maybe we should plan something." She froze for a split second before zipping up her suitcase. "I don't have time for vacations," she said. "Really? You had time for LA." "That was different," she said, avoiding my gaze. "It was a girls' trip, right?" I said, nodding slowly. She finished packing and headed to the bathroom, leaving me alone in the bedroom. I stared at the suitcase, my mind racing. Something wasn't adding up, and I was going to find out what. Carla left for Chicago early Friday morning. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her suitcase in one hand and her phone clutched tightly in the other. "Don't wait up for me," she said with a smirk. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Have fun networking." She didn't even catch the sarcasm. By the time her Uber pulled away, I was already in detective mode. The night before, I'd set up a GPS tracker on her car. She thought she was clever by taking ride shares, but she didn't realize I'd been keeping tabs on her movements for weeks. I knew she wasn't in Chicago for business. I just didn't know where she was going. That Friday afternoon, her tracker pinged at a luxury hotel downtown, one I could never afford on my salary. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to see it for myself. I waited until evening, letting the sun set, so I could blend into the shadows. Then I drove downtown, parked a block away from the hotel, and walked in like I belonged there. The lobby was as fancy as I expected. Marble floors, chandeliers, and a concierge desk staffed by people who looked like they were auditioning for a fashion show. I hung back, watching the elevators. It didn't take long. Around 8 p.m., Carla stepped out of an elevator with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, and reeked of money. His hand rested on the small of her back as they walked toward the hotel bar, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. My heart pounded in my chest, but I stayed hidden. I wasn't going to confront her in public. I needed something more. They didn't stay in the bar long. After one drink, they headed back to the elevator, their body language leaving no doubt about what was going to happen next. I followed at a safe distance, watching them disappear into the elevator as the doors closed. I waited until the elevator came back down, then stepped inside and pressed the button for the top floor. The hallway was quiet when I stepped out. I scanned the room numbers, searching for the one I'd seen her book online. Room 1206. I stopped in front of the door, my hands trembling. I could hear muffled voices on the other side, followed by laughter, and then silence. My stomach twisted as I pulled out the spare key card I'd swiped from her desk drawer. She probably thought I was too stupid to notice she'd left it there, but I wasn't the clueless husband she believed me to be. I slid the card into the lock and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the city lights. My eyes adjusted quickly, taking in the scene before me. Carla was on the bed, her dress pushed up around her waist. The man, her lover, was on top of her, his shirt unbuttoned and his pants halfway down his legs. They didn't even notice me at first. "Enjoying yourselves?" I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the room. Carla froze, her eyes snapping to mine. "Nate?" she shrieked, scrambling to pull her dress down. The man jumped off her like he'd been electrocuted, grabbing a pillow to cover himself. "What the hell is this?" he stammered. "That's my question," I said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. "What the hell is this?" Carla's face turned red, not with shame, but with anger. "You have no right to be here," she screamed. "Oh, I have every right," I shot back. "You're my wife, remember? Or did you forget that while you were spreading your legs for this guy?" Her lover backed away, holding up his hands. "Hey man, I didn't know she was married." "Save it," I said, cutting him off. "I'm not here to argue with you. You can have her." Carla was scrambling now, pulling the sheets up to cover herself. "Nate, please, just listen." "No," I interrupted, my voice low and cold. "You don't get to explain yourself. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and now I get to watch you squirm." Her face turned an ugly shade of red, and she started shouting. "This is insane. You're crazy. I don't have to explain anything to you." "Oh, you'll explain all right," I said, my fists clenched. "But not now. Right now, you're going to pack your things. Get your shit together because I want you gone. And this guy," I turned to the man, "you can get the hell out too." The man was still trying to cover himself, his eyes darting between me and Carla. "I didn't know, man. I swear. She told me you two were separated." "Separated?" I spat. "I don't care what she told you. She's been lying to both of us." Carla's voice cracked as she spoke up again. "Nate, please." "I'm sorry. Okay. I made a mistake. This isn't who I am." "Oh, really?" "Because from where I'm standing, this is exactly who you are." She was on the verge of tears now, but the anger on her face hadn't softened. "You don't understand," she screamed. "You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped. I wanted more. I needed more. More," I said, almost laughing in disbelief. "You needed more? You couldn't talk to me?" "No. You had to go screw around behind my back. I didn't mean for this to happen." Carla sobbed, her voice frantic. "I was lonely. You don't pay attention to me anymore. I needed someone who made me feel special." "You know what I needed?" I said, taking a step closer. "I needed a wife who didn't screw other men in hotel rooms. I needed a wife who didn't think she could lie to me for months and get away with it." She couldn't say anything else. Her face crumpled, but all I could see was the damage she had caused, not the tears she was shedding now. I turned away and walked toward the door, but before I left, I turned back. "I want you out of my house when I get home. I'm done, Carla. Don't contact me again. She was still lying there, her body shaking with sobs, but there was no sympathy in my heart. I couldn't care less about the person she'd become. I walked out of that hotel room, not looking back, and I didn't regret it for a second. Carla never came back. The night I kicked her out of the house, she went straight to him, the man she had been sleeping with behind my back. I thought maybe she'd come crawling back after the shock wore off, begging for forgiveness or at least an apology. But she didn't. She disappeared into his life, and that was it. The first few weeks were the hardest. I'd never imagined her walking out on me, walking out on everything we had. But she did, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. But as the months passed, the pain started to fade, replaced by a quiet kind of emptiness that settled in my chest. It was almost easier without her there, even though it felt wrong. I had to remind myself that I was better off without her, and I tried to move on. I never heard from her during that time. Not once. It wasn't until 6 months later that I found out what had been going on. I was at work when I saw the text. "Nate, please. I need your help. I messed up, and I don't know who else to turn to." It was from Carla. The message was short, but the desperation in it was clear. For a second, I just stared at my phone. I hadn't expected to hear from her again. Not after everything. Not after she'd chosen him over me. Still, something made me respond. I don't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted to hear her out. I called her back. When she picked up, she sounded different, tense, her voice shaky. "Nate, I don't know what to do. I made a huge mistake, and I need you. Please, can you help me out?" "Help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would I help you? After everything you did? I know you hate me right now, and I deserve it. But I'm in serious trouble. I'm stuck, and I don't have anyone else. Please, just hear me out." Her words hung in the air, but I couldn't ignore the panic in her voice. I took a breath. "All right, tell me what's going on." I've been living with Derek," she started, her voice quieter now. "And I found out something I didn't know when I got into this mess. He's been living off his parents this whole time. I thought he was successful. He has all this money, takes me on trips, buys me nice things. But his parents just cut him off. They stopped giving him money." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this new information. So, it wasn't just that she'd betrayed me with another man. She'd been fooled into thinking Derek was something he wasn't. And now, she was stuck in a relationship with a man who wasn't as rich as he'd let on. She continued, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to handle this. I'm on my own, and I can't afford to live like I was. I'm in over my head, Nate. Please. I know I messed up, but can you help me? I'll do anything. I'll work things out with you. I just need a way out of this." A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I listened to her. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even apologizing. Not really. She was just asking for help. "I don't know, Carla," I said slowly. "You walked away from everything, remember? You chose Derek. You chose him over me. You've been living in your little fantasy world while I had to pick up the pieces of my life." I know," she begged. "I was stupid, but I wasn't seeing things clearly. I thought I'd found the perfect guy, but he's just using me like everyone else. I thought he was different, but I was wrong." There it was, the pity party she always seemed to throw for herself, the same self-justification she had given when she'd cheated. "Carla," I said, cutting her off, "this is your mess, not mine. I'm not bailing you out." She let out a sharp breath, like I just punched her in the gut. But there was a brief silence, and then she spoke again, her voice trembling. "Please, Nate, I don't have anyone else. I'm begging you. Don't let me fall apart." There was a long pause, and I felt my patience wearing thin. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the way she was trying to manipulate me back into her life. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the man who had been fooled by her charm and her lies. "I'm sorry, Carla. I can't help you." Her response was immediate, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're really going to leave me like this? After everything we had? After what you did to me?" I didn't even flinch. "You made your bed, Carla. Now you have to lie in it." And I hung up. But as I ended the call, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let her get away with what she had done. Not this time. She thought she could walk out on me, destroy everything we had, and then come back when things weren't going her way. She wasn't going to get a free pass this time. She had no idea what was coming. It was almost surreal, seeing her again after everything that had happened. I never expected to run into Carla, especially not after what she'd done. But there she was, standing in front of me, looking like she'd been through hell. I was walking out of a coffee shop one afternoon when I saw her across the street, standing on the sidewalk, fumbling with her phone. She saw me too, and before I could turn around and pretend I hadn't noticed, she was walking toward me, her eyes wide with that familiar desperation. "Nate," she called out, her voice strained. "Please, just let me talk to you for a second." I stopped in my tracks, and for a moment, I felt that familiar mix of anger and disgust twist in my stomach. But I didn't move. I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't stand up for himself, who let her walk all over him again. She came up to me a little breathless. "I know you probably hate me, but please just listen to what I have to say. It's important." I crossed my arms, keeping my expression neutral. "You're not in any position to ask me for favors, Carla." She flinched, but her face quickly went back to that pleading look I remembered all too well. I know, but I've messed up again, and I need help. Please." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. "What happened? Did Derek finally show his true colors?" She hesitated before speaking, like she was trying to choose her words carefully. It's not even about him anymore," she said, looking around as though she didn't want anyone overhearing her. "I've been living in a mess. He's gone, Nate. I didn't know it at the time, but I was just his fallback. Now he's completely shut me out. I've got nothing left. I don't even know where to turn. Can you help me?" I kept my gaze fixed on her. There was something in her voice, something desperate, but also calculated. I wasn't buying it for a second. "Help you with what?" I asked, my voice steady. "You think I'm just going to hand over money or let you back into my life after everything that happened?" Her face twisted, and I saw a flash of anger. But it quickly faded, replaced by that practiced look of vulnerability she was so good at. "I'm not asking for anything like that, Nate. I need someone to help me get back on my feet. I am stuck. Please." The old Carla, the one who had played me, used me, and lied to me, was still there. And I wasn't going to let her slip back in. "You had a chance, Carla," I said, my voice cold now. "You threw it all away. You destroyed everything, and now you're asking for help. That's not how this works. You're not getting a second chance." She stepped closer, her eyes welling with tears, but I didn't flinch. "You think this is easy for me? You think I'm just going to pretend nothing happened? You think I didn't realize what I lost?" I stepped back, cutting her off. "You already made your choices, and now you're the one who has to deal with them." She stood there for a moment, speechless, like she didn't know how to respond. Then she opened her mouth again, but this time, the words weren't pleading. They were sharp, desperate. "I can't believe you're just going to stand there and watch me suffer, Nate. You're supposed to be the decent guy, the one who doesn't just throw people away. I was your wife. How can you do this to me?" I looked her in the eyes. "I'm not throwing you away, Carla. You did that to yourself." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, not looking back. That night, I thought about her again, but not with sympathy. Not anymore. She had already taken everything from me, and now she was asking for me to fix the mess she made. But I had no intention of saving her. I made a few quiet arrangements, subtle things that would keep her exactly where she was. Not enough to ruin her life completely, but enough to ensure that she wouldn't come crawling back for more. She had no idea how much I had quietly watched, how much I had learned about her and Derek. They were both living in a fantasy world, and I wasn't going to let her destroy mine again. And when she came to me, asking for help, she didn't know that the only thing I was offering her was the cold, hard truth. She'd already lost. She just didn't realize it yet.